For me, I think it's just really important to think there's more. Loneliness is perhaps one of the biggest inequalities facing people in later life. So I guess the project that I'm involved with works very much in the housing sector, and I think the sense that there's some really lovely new builds out there, and they look really fab. But there's some the front door can be a real barrier for people, and these front doors were a particular barrier because they were actually too heavy for older people to open very easily, and we had a lot of discussion in the groups about that, and the fact, the sort of, the cost benefit. So they could have had a button, but they didn't, and they had to be modified. So I think it's really important. I use this quite a lot, so I'm picking up on what Kelly said about. But I think it's so important when we think about loneliness, and research shows that loneliness and social isolation are harmful to our health. Lacking social connections is a comparable risk factor for early death as smoking 15 cigarettes. I just think that, I know it's a second, but it's truly shocking, and I just don't really think it's in the public domain or the public health domain. So I really like to say that, and I'm quite happy to echo it again, because there is something very tangible about that, and all the talk we hear in every sort of medical setting about how very bad smoking is for you, we don't really hear much about people's connectedness. So before talking about the project itself, I'll say a little bit about the Mental Health Foundation. We're a UK-based charity. I suppose we employ about 70 people, but we've been going for quite a long time now, since 1949, and we've got offices in London at London Bridge, Cardiff, which is quite small, and in Glasgow. Our vision is for a world with good mental health for all, and we support that through social research, development work, public information, particularly moving to a public health domain at the moment, and policy work. And things that have been very important to us are focusing on the experiences of people with lived experience. And look, we've got a decade kind of doing quite a lot of peer support, very much self-management issues with different groups of people. So this can be in prisons, in people have recently had contact with secondary psychiatric services, and young people and young mums particularly at the moment. So our mission is to help people understand, protect and sustain their mental health, and prevention is our priority across the life course. So the Standing Together project, it's a 3-year project. We've been working with the housing sector in later life, so we've been running groups, but the groups take place in different types of accommodation. So the important thing to remember really is that people are tenants of their own homes, so they're not in a care home where they'd be called a resident really. But this sort of language isn't necessarily true throughout the country. But so in retirement kind of tenancies, people are buying less care. We've done quite a lot of groups in the extra care setting where people may be buying in care from the landlord or sometimes from the community in general, but in extra care people have got far more acute physical and possibly mental health needs than they have in retirement care. Whereas people in retirement kind of accommodation age, obviously the care balance shifts. The project came from a pilot project where we worked just with people who had sort of memory issues and an early diagnosis of dementia. So the housing schemes tend to be flats and there's a communal space. From the pilot project there was a lot of interest in the groups that were taking place, and the sense that the funding would not allow other people to come to the group, so we upscaled the project and it became called Standing Together. And the people who participate, they may have memory issues still, but they also have mental health issues, a learning disability, or experience loneliness. And actually we had quite a broad remit. People were keen on the project and wanted to come to a group. That felt quite important as well. In terms of the outcomes, the outcomes are very much based on the fact that tenants will report feeling less lonely and socially isolated, improved emotional well-being, a greater level of meaningful activity and sense of purpose and community engagement, and that the groups will be sustained beyond the life of Mental Health Foundation involvement. So we stay in schemes for 6 months tend to bring in 2 facilitators and run weekly sessions that were like an hour and a half to 2 hours a week with quite a clear structure. So they're structured in the sense that there's a kind of warm-up and a main activity, and very importantly there's always tea and cake and fruit, which is actually quite often the most preferred part of the work that we do. We had to change the evaluation. We were doing quite a lot on individual measures. I think there's been a certain amount already around the trickiness of evaluating the impact of loneliness in group settings for people in later life. So we did a sort of more group analysis approach and a kind of a collective assessment of the group, and also, though this wouldn't normally be my way of doing things, we also asked for staff perspectives on how they noticed people were interacting. So about September we finished the delivery side of the project, and we've worked with about 320 people, and we've run groups into 20 different schemes, and that's all in 2 years, 2 months. So it's been quite an intense time, and there's a real, I think we've all enjoyed this work, but it's really quite something when you've got to know people in a very particular way. But everything we do is very much about building relationships with people. The idea, is that groups are owned by participants, and in a sense we co-produce, which word Kelly used, but co-production is very central to the work, my work in mental health, but the work that I'm leading at the foundation in later life and the peer work. So the idea for me, I define, there are lots of definitions of co-production. For me, it's really about working in equal partnership with people, and the sense that we value all expertise and people. There's an element of reciprocity, so people get something, put something in, but they also get something out of it. So the idea is the group is shaped by the interests and passions of participants. We do start with a set of ground rules, and we also have one about we don't allow intolerance and respecting each other, and that kind of is a vehicle to talk about how to deal with conflict in the group. One of my kind of observations coming into this sector and just thinking about people's loneliness was kind of acknowledging that there weren't many spaces for people really to be angry or to have negative emotions, and I think it was something to actually welcome that into the group, though perhaps it's as a facilitator, it's not something you automatically want to happen. But for me, having done quite a lot of peer groups, I think instinctively groups will hold anger. And also when we develop ground rules, it's an opportunity for people to reflect themselves on what they want to do if they feel really upset. So some people will leave the room. So people have strategies for knowing how they're going to cope when things get to be a bit too much. People name the groups, and there's a few here. So things like the Get Together group, the Thursday Club, the Chatterbox group, the Smiley groups, the All Sorts, the Meetup group, and the Come On Down group. So they have an identity, which when groups are sustained, and over half have been sustained beyond our facilitation, but that hasn't necessarily kept going indefinitely, but a percentage is still running at the moment. I think Standing Together is seen, and we've been celebrated quite a bit by the Big Lottery, our funder, as quite a success, and part of that success is to do with the staff team, and all the fact that we're quite committed to the work we do, and some of our basis for the work is very much about being present with people. So we're different from like care staff. We have to be with people for quite a lot of each week. We go for an hour and a half a week, and kind of it generates a different type of energy really. And we also have a very particular way of working. So we plan, and we also have to be quite flexible because things won't necessarily go to plan. But we also look after our own health. But we debrief quite strictly after the groups. So this flexibility is really integral to all that we do. And I think I've had quite a lot of different jobs in mental health, and the Standing Together project work has been by far my favourite, and I think I can echo that of my fellow facilitators as well. I mean, we've used creativity. That's kind of the last part, because when we did so the group's divided into 4 cohorts over the period over the 2 years, 2 months, and our first cohort, the leaving bit, though we felt we had said the length of time we would be there for the project. our leaving was associated with an awful lot of loss and upset. And again, some senses from some people that it would have been better not to have had the intervention at all if they known they were going to have to mourn it, which was pretty harsh research, reflections for ourselves. So something about the challenging, so something about endings well, and something about picking up on how rarely in life we do endings well at all, but also the kind of creative excellence and the celebration of what everybody in the room brings, including ourselves as facilitators. And also I think the fact that I'm from a particular background, and though I'm not an artist that much of the time, I think my approach to this type of work I've been able to bring in some of the kind of flexibility and the ways of working that I hopefully use as an artist as well. So what we've done with the project, we've done things like different photographic projects, but we gave tenants digital cameras, and they took images of reflecting what happened, the everyday realities of their lives. And this is quite powerful, and some people who I might regard as more lonely than others, who may spend more time in their flats, took quite a repetitious cycle of photographs, very beautiful, about just what they're looking at on an everyday basis. So that felt quite powerful. The welcome pack. A lot of people moving into this type of flats, they're at, as Kelly was mentioning, a transition point in their lives. And this has came out the first lot of groups, but there was a sense when a new tenant joined the group, the initial idea being just to write a letter of welcome to them, but actually it became an induction pack, and there was quite a big event which is quite a large housing organisation called Housing and Care 21, their chief executive came to this event and acknowledged they really should have induction packs. But this is really about, I guess it's about the knowledge the tenants had about the reality of their accommodation. So it's really practical stuff about where's the GP, how much does the hair salon cost, what time you eat your lunch, and also a little bit of background about where you sit when you eat your lunch, which is always quite a contentious issue. Music, a huge part of all of our identities. Using music a lot, but one of the things that we left behind at schemes, and very much the property of the scheme, is these playlists and songs that people had highlighted as amongst their favourite music. So that's something that we leave behind, as is the collages. Oh, I've got a picture of collages. Sorry, no, I haven't. But we also make collages which reflect the themes of what we've talked about and things that people might have made in the groups. We also use things like memory boxes as well. What I haven't talked about is the element of we're a mental health foundation. We're a mental health charity called the Mental Health Foundation. It's been very interesting thinking about what that's meant and around the stigma around mental health in old age, and kind of what advantages an organisation, which is we have a high profile on social media now, we're able to bring in things like Mental Health Awareness Day, things like there's an event called Tea and Talk. It's equivalent of many of the charity sectors, but these are kind of excuses to talk more about mental health with tenants, but also to look at what expertise people already have about what they do when they have a difficult day. Probably our most impressive project to date was this co-produced book, which is called Our Ups and Downs, Growing Up and Getting On with the Rotherhithe Babes. Initially we thought they were going to call them the Bermondsey Babes, but they insisted on being called the Rotherhithe Babes. But this is something about this depth of sort of expertise and knowledge that one group of society might have, and the book was a means to communicate that. But it's fantastic. I mean, I'm 50, so I become a peer while doing this piece of work. But I didn't know a lot about bath houses or going making hops holidays where you might meet people. So this was a real pleasure to do. They live very close to the Brunel Museum, and it got launched there. And they also do some quite funny films where they go on Twitter and find out about modern dating, which has been an interesting experience for everybody. Okay, so the future. Kelly was at an event we did only in mid-October where we're co-producing a handbook. So the pilot project that I mentioned had quite a structured handbook about how you run this sort of group. we kind of want to do a slightly different book which talks about the feel of the project, who we've met. So out of the 300 people, we've got some funny facts about their names. There were like 9 Margarets, 9 Annes and 9 Johns, and also people's ethnicity, because we were working South London boroughs. So we've worked with people from all over the world. We're licensing a toolkit which will be a bit more practical, and it'll be a way for how the housing sector to buy into the work that we do. And we've got a version of the Standing Together Wales, which is through to the second stage of the Welsh Lottery, but we've been able to shape that project with the learning of this project, and we've really got the housing providers on board from the beginning, so we really hope the sustainability element will really shine through. I mean, ultimately, it's about aiming to improve quality of life and facilitating cultural change, and I'm sure there's an economic cost benefit in there, and I think that's something for the future about how many times people visit the GP, if they're in contact with their neighbours, and just how this idea that the front door, as I said at the beginning, is a real barrier. We've seen it played out in groups where people don't necessarily know their neighbours. They may have lived next door to them for quite some time, and this is in a quarter flats where you potentially might expect people to know each other. It's not always the case.